Before we begin, I would like to apologize for any issues in quality regarding the video itself. This is my first upload where I actually talk, and it's also one of my first major uploads to begin with. All that I ask is that you consider the ideas rather than the actual presentation of the video. I admit that the presentation may be a bit subpar in some regards, but at the same time I also understand that it's really the best that I can do. Regardless, I do hope that you enjoyed the video, and I hope that I can convince you that this is a good idea. It is not uncommon to hear complaints among the Smash Bros. Community regarding the number of Fire Emblem characters. This is a rather understandable position to have. Any series hitting over 5 characters typically demands justification, and if the justification itself is unsatisfactory, this can lead to a great deal of annoyance. I imagine this would make some wince at the thought of yet another Fire Emblem character in Smash Bros. I have quite a few points to make, but my intent here is to make a case not just for why Tiki would make a good Smash Bros. Character, but deserves to be in Smash Bros. I will do my best to introduce the character and moveset in a satisfactory way that both treats the character and series with respect. I would also like to note that this one is worth the potential annoyance from detractors, and may even invoke less ire from the anti-Fire Emblem crowd than would be seen under other circumstances. Tiki was first introduced in 1990 with Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. She is the daughter of Naga and princess of the Divine Dragon tribe. Despite her nobility, she is quite childish, and it is very clear that she has a lot of growing left to do. Admittedly, she lacks character depth. This is a given due to being on the Famicom. There's already a ton of story in Fire Emblem 1, given that this is 1990 and on the NES no less. Tiki is given extra development in other games and spin-offs, mainly establishing her appreciating all the people in her life, especially Marth, and her desire to prove herself despite her age. There are quite a few reasons to add Tiki to Smash Bros.' Fire Emblem roster, one of which is visual distinctiveness. Her palette alone makes her stand out. At the moment, everyone, excluding Robin from Fire Emblem, uses blue in their color scheme. Tiki doesn't include any blue whatsoever, with a greater emphasis on pink and purple, and even her hair color being green. Alongside that, her design and age would stand out a great deal compared to the rest of the cast, most notably her height barely coming up to Marth's chest, and her lack of a cape could also be seen as a plus to some. We also haven't had a true child character in Smash Bros., and Tiki fits that bill almost perfectly. And no, Young Link and Toon Link don't count. They don't have any explicitly childlike qualities, Toon Link, more fittingly, being like that of a cartoon character, and Young Link still retaining adult Link's stoicism. Tiki being a wholly unique character would have no points of reference to allow for anything other than a more childish style in general. Her moveset's options would also be quite distinct, primarily due to her status as a shifter, but I think I should save that for its own section. Some may be wondering about Awakening Tiki. This is natural, given the obvious connection. The reasons are mainly due to a lack of icon status, with young Tiki really being the most common variant to appear in spin-offs and crossovers, appearing in Fire Emblem Warriors, Tokyo Mirage Sessions, alongside even being playable in the Switch re-release that's coming out early next year, and even having more variants in Heroes. Young Tiki is also Tiki in her most natural form. This is the Tiki that the character originated from, and Awakening Tiki is really more of a reference than anything else. Awakening Tiki basically feels like a new character entirely. In fact, she's so disconnected from her younger self that to consider them interchangeable is a laughable concept. And no random support conversation where she's being socially inappropriate is going to change that. There is also the matter of abilities. It is never explicitly noted if adult Tiki and child Tiki have the same abilities. It's not mentioned in gameplay or story, and thus it would be quite jarring if it was implemented in such a way. Alongside that, in the context of a theoretical DLC character, Child Tiki would not require any changes to be made to already existing assist trophies or spirits. Her classic Mystery of the Emblem art could be used as a fighter spirit, so nothing major, if at all, would need to be changed. The amiibo also depicts young Tiki, which, while not overly important, would certainly add some points in her favor. Smash Bros. Has yet to include a proper example of one of Fire Emblem's most iconic class types, shifters. The lack of shifters in Smash Bros. Is a very notable hole. It's hard to find a Fire Emblem which doesn't use shifters in some capacity, be it thematically, like Blazing Blade, or even as a playable class, such as Shadow Dragon. And this is the only class type that can't be ignored at this point. as it's so deeply ingrained in Fire Emblem's DNA that to ignore it is absolutely ridiculous. And to anyone saying, but Corrin is so disconnected from other shifters that to treat him as one of them really shows a deep misunderstanding of shifters in general. This is not even to mention the fact that Corrin primarily uses the Yato, which kind of misses the point of adding a shifter, given that he only transforms for 3 or 4 moves. I think it's a little bit sad that Sakurai's never actually considered shifters as a playable character in Smash Bros., and this is something that I think does need to be rectified at some point. When making Smash Bros. Character requests, people have a tendency to omit the moveset. This is understandable, mainly given that it's very difficult to create a moveset and it can be very extensive, taking hours to figure out. I, naturally, have decided that not doing so would harm my admittedly very low credibility. So, after several weeks, I have compiled a moveset that I hope catches your interest. To begin, I propose a transformation gauge. The gauge would fill slowly over time, regardless of damage received or taken. Tiki would then be able to use her down special to charge it slightly faster. It would take roughly 1 full minute of continuous, active charging to fill the gauge, or roughly 3 minutes of passive charging. The gauge would be emptied after Tiki is KO'd. When the gauge is filled, Tiki can use her down special to transform into her Divine Dragon form. This would cause some of her moves to change and be more powerful. Now I'm going to talk about the general properties of the character. When untransformed, Tiki's weight class will be light, and when she's transformed, she will be considered heavy. She will have 3 jumps. When untransformed, she will use her wings to get a 3rd jump. If she flinches during an attack that requires that she transform, she will revert to her normal form. This includes getting grabbed. When she's in her Divine Dragon form, however, this will not be the case. If she must transform for an attack, the animation to transform to and from will raise the startup and lag time for the move. To begin, I'll be going over Tiki's specials, which is the proper backbone of any good Smash Bros. Moveset. For Tiki's neutral special, she will use a Firestone to transform into a Fire Dragon, and breathe fire directly in front of her. This move would be quite similar to Charizard or Bowser's neutral special, but it would be larger overall, as well as draw in opponents, making it less effective at edgeguarding, but increasing its overall damage capabilities. Due to its high range and damage, it would also have a longer cooldown after overuse makes it ineffective, as well as a longer startup in general due to the transformation. When shifted, the move will change to Breath of Fog, in which case it will be faster to start and stop. It'll also do more damage and push targets outward, increasing its edgeguarding capabilities. For Tiki's side special, she will use a Mage Stone to transform into a Mage Dragon and breathe lightning in the input direction. This move will travel across the stage. The range will be long enough to reach the blast zone on most stages, maybe even going so far as to give it an indefinite range. This move can then be held for an indefinite period of time at the cost of having exceptionally low damage, around 4% per second of continuous contact. Alongside that, it will have no knockback whatsoever, as well as doing extra damage to shields to pressure opponents. The player will also be able to directionally influence this move. By inputting up or down while the move is active, will allow for you to be able to angle it either more upwardly or downwardly. This can be used to attack opponents in the air to also rack up extra damage. When shifted, the move will transform into Divine Mist. The move will have more damage and also be faster to start and stop. Otherwise, it will be relatively similar, if not the exact same. For Tiki's up special, she will transform into a wyvern and fly in the input direction while breathing poison. This move will be quite similar to Fox or Ridley's up special, where it would damage enemies when contact is made. This would also cause poison damage to foes, in a similar way to moves such as Joker's or Piranha Plant's side specials. When shifted, Tiki would revert to her normal form and would then transform into a wyvern. This would force Tiki to revert, causing a potential weakness for opponents to target. There would be no differentiation between shifted and unshifted in this case. For Tiki's down special, she will have 3 different possibilities based on her state at a given time. Under normal circumstances, this move will be referred to as wait, in which case Tiki will speed up her gauges being filled by 3 times its normal speed. When the gauge is filled, Tiki will use her Divine Stone to transform into her Divine Dragon form. In this form, she will have increased attack power, as well as having all of her attack speed changed to better suit this different form. When Tiki is transformed, this move will change to Revert, which will allow for Tiki to assume her usual form. This will also refill her gauge based on the remaining amount. For Tiki's final smash, she will transform into her Divine Dragon form, and an apparition of Naga will appear around her and attack with Divine Breath. This move would attack directly in front of her, dealing high damage to everyone caught in it. Its range would cover a large area in front of Tiki, finishing with a high launch attack. This would be very likely to KO any enemies close to the edge, on the edge, or off the stage. In this next section, I'll be going over Tiki's ground attacks. Tiki's jab will be a 3-hit combo. She will begin by punching the target, using her Dragonstone to build extra momentum. This will be followed by a weak kick. Tiki will then finish by harshly shoving the opponent with both arms, dealing damage and launching them. This move is meant to be quick to get enemies off of you, but is incapable of KOing. When shifted, this move will be a 2-hit jab. The two would be downward slashes with her claws. They would be slow and powerful, and even capable of KOing at higher percentages. Tiki's side tilt would see her throwing her Dragonstone forward in a straight line. After reaching a maximum distance of roughly 3 character lengths, the Dragonstone would reverse its trajectory and return to Tiki. This move would also deal damage in both directions, similarly to Link's Boomerang. This move would be fairly safe across the board, however it would leave Tiki somewhat exposed on the opposite side during the duration of the move, as she would be immobilized until the Dragonstone returned to her. Due to being considered a projectile, this move can also be reflected naturally. When shifted, Tiki would attack with her tail in a similar way to Charizard's side tilt. However, Tiki's would be slightly faster and less damaging. When crouching, Tiki would get down with her legs against her chest and her arms above her head, appearing to be bracing. This would look visually similar to a tornado drill. When shifted, Tiki would get down on all fours, trying to keep as low a profile as possible. She would be given the ability to crawl, however, it wouldn't be very effective due to her large size. When unshifted, Tiki's down tilt would have her sweeping the ground with her right hand, using her Dragonstone to give her extra weight to have actual force behind the attack. This would be low damaging, and would also have the ability to trip under some circumstances. When shifted, Tiki would sweep the ground with her arm. This move would be quick and have medium range. It would also deal fairly average damage, but would be unable to trip. Tiki's up tilt would have her quickly raising her Dragonstone in the air with both hands. Some magic would come out, and this would damage opponents. Visually speaking, this would be somewhat similar to Nessa's up tilt. When shifted, she will perform a wide upward swing with her arm. This would be somewhat similar to Link's up tilt, with the primary intent being anti-air. It would be slow, but hit hard. In Tiki's dash attack, she would run forward, flailing her arms around, hitting several times. The attack would conclude with her falling over, launching the opponent. When shifted, Tiki's dash will be similar to Charizard's, flying slightly over the ground. Her dash attack will have her quickly landing and rushing forward on all fours, launching anyone who contact is made with. The attack will conclude with Tiki falling forward onto her chin. This particular set of frames will deal more damage than any other part of the attack. However, this will also be when Tiki is at her most exposed. Next on to aerials. For her neutral air, Tiki would spin in the air with her arm outstretched, hitting enemies with her Dragonstone. It'll produce 2 hitboxes, one first in the front and another in the back. This would be a single spin with okay range, and the launch would be enough to get enemies off of you. When shifted, Tiki performs a somersault, damaging enemies who contact is made with. This move wouldn't be too far off from Charizard or Ridley's neutral air. The range would not be too far beyond her size. It would have medium speed and damage. For her forward air, Tiki would swing her arm downward in front of herself using her Dragonstone. This would do medium damage and would have decent range. Its speed would be roughly average. This may be able to combo from other ground-based attacks. When shifted, the animation would be fairly similar, though she would use her claws instead. It would mostly just be bigger and it would hit harder. This would naturally be capable of KOing. Tiki's back air would be a 2-hit combo using her wings, first with her pushing them outward, dealing damage to the opponent, and then flapping them, which would then proceed to launch them. This move would also produce a wind box in the second hit. The move would have medium speed, and the damage wouldn't be overly high. However, the wind box could be used to deal with recovering enemies. This move would be roughly the same when shifted. However, the wind box would be larger. For Tiki's up air, she will punch upward with her Dragonstone. This wouldn't be an overly effective move by any stretch, but could be used for ladder combos in some cases, maybe even going so far as to let it combo into itself. When shifted, she will fire off a very strong breath attack, producing an explosion above her. This move would naturally be capable of KOing, but wouldn't be overly fast. This attack would also slightly push her down, similar to Ivysaur's up air. For Tiki's down air, she will grip her Dragonstone with both hands and then swing them downward. This attack will naturally have a meteor effect when hit at the right spot. It won't be overly fast, but it will do a fair bit of damage. When shifted, Tiki will turn her head downward and perform a very powerful breath attack. This will meteor at the very start of the attack, and once it gets going, it will have a very long range. However, the lag will be quite high for the move, almost certainly requiring the user to use her recovery, which would then require her to revert. All of Tiki's smash attacks will have her transforming to perform them. It's hard to say exactly what form she should be taking for these individual animations. However, I do like the idea of utilizing multiple forms, though that could potentially lead to some issues down the line. Due to these transformations, Tiki's smash attacks will have very wide, very long ranges, and will also be very slow, but incredibly powerful under most circumstances. When she is shifted, these animations will not be present, and thus the attacks will be faster by their very nature. This in turn will make her transformed state a lot more terrifying to deal with. For Tiki's side smash, she will transform into a mage dragon and perform Dark Breath. This will produce a large explosion off to the side, which will look like a cloud of darkness. When shifted, this move will look more like her usual Fog Breath. The damage would be fairly high, as would the range, naturally, but there would be a fair bit of lag after the move is performed. Tiki's down smash would have her transforming into a fire dragon and attacking the ground using Flame Tongue. After hitting the ground, this move would then split and attack both sides. This would be a multi-hit and would have moderate launch. When in her Divine Dragon form, this would be missed as usual. For her up smash, she will transform into her Divine Dragon form and attack upwards using Light Breath. The vertical range would be very high, and it would probably be a lot more like Palutena's up smash, except centered more on Tiki's body. The damage would be good, and it could possibly combo from her up tilt when shifted. And finally, we're going to be moving on to Tiki's grabs and throws. For her grab, Tiki will grab the target with her left hand, appearing as though she's trying with all of her might to hold on to them, to the point of looking almost distressed. When shifted, she'll grab the target with both arms and hold them down using her large stature. For her pummel, Tiki will hit the target with her Dragonstone. It will be medium speed and do average damage. When shifted, Tiki hits the target with her head, trying not to let go. This would be slower, but stronger. For her forward throw, Tiki pushes the target forward. The launch would be low, but it would send the target at a downward angle, causing them to hit the ground. This would allow for follow-ups. I have also played around with the idea of making it so that if Tiki does this at the edge of the stage, then the momentum will continue to force the opponent downward. However, I could see this being somewhat overpowered. When shifted, Tiki would pick the target up and throw them forward. The launch would be average, as would be the damage. For Tiki's back throw, she'll spin the target around in a similar fashion to Mario's back throw. However, it will be significantly less refined, and Tiki would stumble on the dismount. The launch would be average naturally. When shifted, Tiki would throw the target back over her head and swat them away using her tail. This would be a kill move at the edge of the stage. For Tiki's down throw, she would grab the target with both arms in a bear hug, and then leap forward, launching them upwards after they hit the ground. The launch would be low, however this could be comboed into her up air. When shifted, Tiki would shove the target onto the ground, and then she would drop down on top of them. This would have moderate launch. For her up throw, Tiki would enthusiastically throw the target upwards. The launch would be moderate. When shifted, she would throw the target up and then slam them up with her head. This would be capable of killing at high percents. To summarize, I wanted to reference as much as possible from both heroes as well as older Fire Emblems. I decided that having her utilize primarily breath attacks and her stronger attacks would make for an interesting playstyle. As for how large I envision her dragon forms being, I think Ridley with a Mega Mushroom would be a good reference point to start. However, I will go over the size matter later. I mainly wanted her shifted state to be intimidating, to justify a 30 to 45 second timer, and a 3-minute wait time. I think this is the main reason why Tiki should be in the game. She has an insanely diverse set of options to work with, and the space for real, tangible references is astounding. Not just to reference Tiki, but all the dragon shifters that the series has had thus far. This next section will be on her design, alts, and fighter spirits. For the best design that I think she could use, I would recommend using her Mystery of the Emblem design, which is in line with her amiibo. The only major difference between this and Shadow Dragon Tiki is the shoes. Her palette swaps could be references to other dragon shifters across the series. This would include Faye, Myr, maybe even including a red variant for her adult incarnation, and maybe even a darker toned one to reference Kurthnaga from the Teleus games. For some more tangible alts, I have 3 options in mind. The first would be the most likely, which would be her Cloaked alt, which has appeared in Heroes and the Fire Emblem TCG. This one has a charming simplicity to it, and the production of the alt wouldn't really be too difficult, on account of more likely than not just needing a copy-paste of Tiki's base model, and the cloak could be added on top of that. The next one would be based on Tiki's Warrior's class change. I just really like this one. I think it's cute, and it would make for a visually interesting addition. However, I think this is probably the least likely of the 3 to be added. As for the third, I like the idea of Tiki's Utaloid design from Tokyo Mirage Sessions. Again, I think it's cute, and it would make for an interesting reference to one of Fire Emblem's more obscure spin-offs. However, this and the Warrior's alt may have some issues due to licensing. For the fighter spirits, I previously mentioned classic Tiki art. I think that it would be very cool to have a Fire Emblem character with retro art as a fighter spirit. As for the Warriors in Tokyo Mirage Sessions alt, here is some possible art which could be used from Fire Emblem Cypher. I am unaware, however, if there would be any licensing issues due to the artists possibly having some right to their works, however. For her dragon forms, I believe it would be best to primarily use the Mystery of the Emblem designs for them, mainly because this has the most unique variance between all 3 of them. As for the spirits themselves, if they decide to be added, you could mostly use TCG artwork for that. For Tiki's animations, taking into account the fact that she is a child would give plenty of unique possibilities. I think it would be a really good way to add some extra flair to her moves, such as having her stumble or show enjoyment after attacks. The primary intent is to make it seem like she is enjoying herself, but lacks general coordination. I also think that it would be a good idea to have her lack refinement even when transformed, like having her transformed dash attack end with her overshooting the attack and falling forward. This would help her better differentiate from Charizard and Ridley more fundamentally when shifted. Next I'm going to look at Tiki's idle stance and movement. For her idle stance, that's something that I really put a lot of thought into, mainly because I really don't know exactly how to go about it. There are a few ideas, but also some things to keep in mind. Warriors does give an animation option to use. It gives off an aura of impatience. Tiki is sitting still but has too much energy. This worked well in Warriors, but I don't know for sure if it would work too well in a fighting game. I think it would be a bit too distracting for anything even remotely competitive. I think a better option to go for would be basing her idle animation off of her sprites from Mystery of the Emblem and Shadow Dragon. This could be complemented with occasional animations which would include impatiently looking around, getting flustered, and quickly returning to normal, yawning and stretching, and small hops being done out of boredom. When shifted, I think Warriors got it about right, standing upright with her arms close. Probably having small clouds of mist coming out of her mouth with every breath would also make it a bit more visually distinct, and intimidating, naturally. The animations that would go off on occasion would have her looking around a bit more seriously, and an occasional yawn, perhaps. Basing her walk cycle off of this particular TCG artwork could provide more variance for Tiki's animations. Her dash could be more like Warrior's. When shifted, I think Warrior's got it right. A slow, intimidating walk, but taking to the air for her dash. I recall Sakurai once saying that taunts are generally whatever he wants them to be, so they're not overly important. But that doesn't mean I can't give a few ideas myself. I think that a taunt based on this art would be a good idea. The very magical girl-esque pose would be very suitable for a taunt, as well as having some extra effects appearing around her. Another concept that I like is having Tiki throw her Dragonstone up and trying to catch it, only to fail and picking it up off the ground. And for a third taunt, Tiki could raise her Dragonstone in the air above her head in a similar fashion to her idle animation in Heroes, where it would begin to shine. I admit that when she's shifted, nothing especially unique comes to mind, other than a fierce roar, which is legally required by international law. Victory animations are far from the most important thing to consider, but still necessary all the same. A victory animation can be whatever feels right to use, much like taunts. Of course, taunts work well in most circumstances for victory animations, so I think that using this one, of course, naturally would be good. As well as having her throw her Dragonstone up, which I think would make for a funny victory animation. I also think that using this art as a reference for a victory animation would honestly be as close to perfect as you could get. It needs to be noted that there will always be problems with any Smash Bros. Character being added, and Tiki is no exception. So in order to come across as not being biased, I will give all of the ones that come to mind. First off is Tiki's design. Some may be put off by it. I do think this is probably the lowest of her possible issues, but admittedly her dress is a little bit short, and that could lead to some controversy. The fixes are naturally fairly easy, however. Lowering the slits would help, and likewise the dress can be lengthened somewhat to make up skirts harder. Not that that's a real issue. As we all know, under any Smash Bros. Character's dress, skirt, or tunic is either shorts, leggings, the vacuum of space, or an endless void in which all manner of cosmic horrors dwell. Simply put, this probably isn't an issue, and if it is, it can be easily rectified. The second issue that I've encountered is summed up with a statement, but I don't want to beat up a little girl. And I respond to that with, then SD, you invertebrate. In all seriousness, if that really is your problem, no one takes issue with beating the crap out of young Link, Peach, and Pichu, and then when you combine these traits of these characters, suddenly everybody takes issue with it. It's not really much of a problem, I understand, but I thought it was worth noting. The third thing that comes up, a bit more seriously, this could be a real problem. I don't know how hard this would be to implement. Tiki is a very different fighter, and to add her would require at least 3 new models to be created, 5 if my moveset gets used with no compromise, and 6 if an ult is factored in. And that's not to mention whether or not the Switch can handle it. I don't doubt the power of the Switch, but we would need to factor in 8 fairly large dragon models in play all at once with items on, and probably on the busiest of stages. Do that alongside maintaining 60 frames per second. While this probably isn't as much of an issue as I think it is, it certainly could be an issue in the future. And lastly, her size. Some people may say that Tiki's dragon form is a little bit too big. I'm inclined to disagree, mainly due to the fact that Tiki's dragon form would only be temporary, so it would only really show up for certain amounts of time. Alongside that, liberties can be taken if needed to allow for 8 players. And fifth, too much Fire Emblem. I'm not going to go too in-depth on this one, mainly because I don't want to trail off on this topic for 15 minutes. The video is already a bit too long to begin with. But Fire Emblem's representation has been bad up to this point. It's almost exclusively been new toy syndrome for how characters are decided. Instead of picking what would make an interesting character, Sakurai has almost exclusively chosen who is new. And that's honestly ruined the Fire Emblem roster up to this point. I understand that not every character can maintain relevance forever, but it feels kind of sad when I realize that more likely than not, Ephraim or Erika would have gotten in place of Ike if development had begun in 2004 for Brawl. This means that Fire Emblem hasn't been given its best, only what was most recent at the time. This was even the case with Roy, who would be just as faceless in the West as Sigurd if not for Melee. I mean this is a personal challenge to Sakurai, because I know he's definitely watching a video in English from a person with 3 subscribers, 2 of whom are friends and family. But if we get a new Fire Emblem character in his DLC, don't do any 3 houses. Not because it lacks options. I quite like Byleth conceptually, but because it would only trail into what you've always done. Instead, ask yourself, what does Fire Emblem need to feel truly represented, and go from there. Don't just call it quits at the new guy. I'm not asking for Fire Emblem to have 15 characters. I'm asking for quality, not quantity. In conclusion, I think the Tikis deserve to be in Smash Bros. For a long time. Her moveset, design, and personality would make for a legitimately unique character, and the fact that Sakurai seems to have never considered it is bizarre. I'm actually really kind of saddened by the fact that this has yet to be the case, and I would like to see something done about it. I understand that my channel barely exists, but if I don't try at all, then absolutely nothing will happen. So if you like this idea, feel free to share the video around, give a like and a comment, and for the more talented of you, I don't mind if you translate my video to any other language, or even if you decide to make your own take on this. Maybe even post to Twitter with the hashtag Tiki for Smash. Really try to get this out there, if only to help see this unfortunate blunder corrected in Smash 6. But I think that if people really get it out there, they may just decide to add her in future DLC packs. But regardless, this isn't just about Tiki and Smash Bros. Fire Emblem has gotten a really bad name to the Smash Bros. Community, mainly due to too many similar characters, and I think that Tiki could help alleviate that. Feel free to subscribe if you want to, but I can't guarantee that I'll be able to upload constantly, mainly due to my schedule not really catering to that at the moment, and really just not knowing what I'd like to do next. That aside though, I may start uploading a little bit more in the future, so I guess stay tuned. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed the video, and feel free to give me some feedback if you want, and I hope you have a nice day.